Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of Small English Class. This morning, we are going to examine active and passive sentences. But before we go, let's quickly take a good look at what sentences are. I believe you will remember that when we're talking of any utterance, any expression that makes a complete thought, we are referring to a sentence. Structure. Speaking of the sentence, we are basically talking of what is known as finite verb. Speaking of what a finite verb implies, this is where we actually talk of a verb that agrees in terms of number, gender, and time with a subject. If you take a good look at this, we have two keywords. We have a verb and we have a subject. Basically, speaking of a sentence, we are actually talking of S and V. S and V is a simple form of a sentence. Subject, the performer of an action. Verb, the action performed. Now, we have an extended version of it. From this, we can have on, the receiver of an action, known as the object. C, the complement that gives additional information about either the object or the subject. At the same time, A, the adjunct, playing the roles of adverbials. So, under this aspect that we want to deal with today, we will examine these three elements. S, V, O, subject, verb, and object. Before we go further, speaking of active sentence, this is a sentence that we are trying to examine when we are trying to talk about when we say a verb is actively used. Like this construction now, the verb here is actively used. Like we say, the hunter killed a lion. If you take a good look at this, the hunter, as we have it here, happens to be our subject. What did the hunter do? The hunter killed. This happens to be our finite verb. Directly, who was affected by the action of the hunter? That would be a lion. Object. S, V, O. When you have this kind of construction, we refer to this as active sentence. Apart from this, whenever you want to talk of a passive sentence, instead of the verb to be actively used, it will be used in the passive form. Meaning that we have to alternate the position of the direct subject and the direct object. Instead of having a lion killed the hunter, that will give us another meaning entirely in the active form. But we want to have the fact that the lion is the one that received the action, but the lion will have to be placed as a subjective case. We have the construction like this. When we have our O to come to the position of X to be a lion, and our S will have to go to the position of the O as the hunter. So we are down to determining the verb. Which kind of verb are we going to use? That will make it different from active verb. That exactly is what we are going to examine today. The first thing that we need to consider here right now is having the verb form in passive. What are these? We call them the passive verbs. Let's wipe the following first. Let's have the following What are the passive verbs that we need to determine? Before we actually go to determining passive verbs, we need to consider the various kinds of tenses that we have. This is another aspect that we need to look into when we're talking of active and passive voice and verbs. Speaking of the tenses, the following tenses will have to be considered. The first one, we call it a simple tense. Do not forget, when we say a tense, we are talking of a time of an action. Speaking of a simple tense, we are talking of the tense or the verb that appear regularly. It talks of what we do regularly. Probably we do it on daily basis, or on weekly basis, or a monthly basis, or thereabout. Just regular. Every day I wash my car. Every day I wash my car. The boys go to school by bus daily. The boys go to school by bus daily. The verb that we have here is go. This kind of tense is talking of what happened on a regular basis. That is simple tense. It may come in the present form or in the past form. Like we say, we did not finish our tasks on time. We are talking of what happened in the past now. Did not finish implies a simple tense. Apart from this, let's talk about the second one, continuous tense. When we're talking of a continuous tense, basically, this is when we talk of the tense that involves an action we are doing progressively. We are not done with it yet. We are still in the action at that moment. To identify continuous tense, we are going to look for ing. What is called verb ing? We are basically talking about the verbs that ends with ing. When do we determine that verbs ing are used as continuous tense? That is exactly when we are talking of the usage of the following primary auxiliaries. Auxiliaries like am, which takes I, or we have is, which takes e, she, or it. Now, we talk of the third one, which is supposed to be are, the plural, which will take they, you, and we. At the same time, we have the past tense of is, which will be was. It also use a, she, and it. Likewise, were, the past tense of was. Basically, we are talking of the following 5 auxiliaries. Speaking of am, is, are, was, and were. To avoid any confusion, let's make it clearer this way. We have the following. Again, am. Now, this will take is, while this will take are. We have was, and at the same time, we have were. Anywhere we use any one of the following verbs with a verb ing, verb ing, with any of this one, basically we are talking of continuous tense. We are going to utilize each one of these when we get to the second episode of active and passive sentences. Let's consider the verb ing that will go with this one now. The ing form of go is supposed to give us going. That of wash will give us washing. I believe you remember this. Just add ing to the base. Add ing to the base. We have beat. Add ing to beat. It will give us beating. And so on and so forth. That is that about continuous tense. When we say, I am writing or not, we're saying basically that at the moment, I am not done with the writing, I am still writing or not. I am writing or not. If we have this like this, we say that this is a present progressive tense, or what is called present continuous tense. It is an action that is still being done. It is still ongoing. It is not done yet. We say they are playing Scrabble. What are they doing? At the moment, they are playing Scrabble. That is that about continuous tense. I'm playing, I'm writing. Now, apart from that, let's talk of the past form. Please take note of this. When we're speaking of the past continuous tense, we have to indicate another clause that indicates past action. Like, when I entered, Tolani was sweeping the room. To indicate that it was actually in the past, before we use past continuous, we must have a time adverb. Take note of that. Also, apart from this, the next type of tense that we need to consider is known as perfect tense. Perfect tense. Speaking of a perfect tense, we have to consider something known as anomalous auxiliaries. A perfect tense basically talks of a completed action. When we use simple tense to determine what we do regularly, we use continuous tense to determine what we are doing at the moment, and we use perfect tense to determine what we have finished, what has already been completed. We call that a perfect tense. How do we identify this? You need either has, or you need have, or we need had. Whichever one we use between the three. As and have basically stand for present. They basically stand for present verb, while had stands for past verb. Whichever one we use out of the three, know fully well that the verb that follows should be verb en. Verb en is also known as a past participle. A past participle. Please do not make a mistake of thinking a base will come afterwards. Base of the verb cannot come after anomalous auxiliaries. These are the anomalous auxiliaries has, have, and had. Now, let's consider the following examples. The girl has returned to the class. The girl is a third person singular. That is why we use has as the third person singular present perfect tense. So the verb that will follow, the main verb, we have to be past participle, known as verb en. If it were to be plural of third person, it will now take had, like they, her, completed the work. They have completed the work. They have completed the work. We can't say they have completed the work. We can say they have completed the work, whereas they have completed the work. Meaning that the plural of them, probably 2 or 3 or more, have completed the task that they were doing before. Now, speaking of have, we can also use I have done my part of the task. I've done my part of the task. You cannot say I has done. You can rather say I have done. Now, apart from this, speaking of the past, talking of had, please you should remember the rule I gave while we are talking of past continuous. The same rule stands in past perfect. Anytime you want to use had, try to indicate a time adverb like he had completed the work before. He had completed the work before we returned. He had completed the work before we returned. Before we returned happens to be a adverbial clause of time, stating the time that the action was completed. Had completed, we have to go. Please take note of that as well. The last one that we need to consider before we actually determine how we are going to convert active sentences to passive is known as future tense. Future tense. When we're speaking of future tense, basically, we are talking of the tense that discuss what has not happened, an action that we have not done. We have not even started that. Do not forget, simple is what we do regularly. Continuous is what we are doing now, at the moment. Perfect is what we have completed. And future is what we are going to do. We have not started that. To identify future tense, we are going to employ the services of the third type of auxiliary verb, known as modal auxiliary. The auxiliary verbs that express attitude and behavior. Modal auxiliary. Modal auxiliaries are going to be used to determine future tense. What are these modal auxiliaries? Let's consider will as the present form or would in the past. Speaking of shall or should. Speaking of can or could. Speaking of may or might. Likewise, we have must, or we have had to. At the same time, we can have ought to, and so on and so forth. Any one of the following that we use, each one of them has specific function and specific role they play. Now, the verb that will follow, take note, should be the base, what is known as infinitive. What is known as plural present verb will have to follow. We can say, will sing, would dance, can write, shall go. Are we together now? Should play, and so on and so forth. What are these verbs we're talking about? We talk of play, not played, not playing, not plays. We have watch, we have wash, we have ask, we have beat, and so on and so forth. The base of the verb will have to be used. The base of the verb will have to be used when we're talking of future tense. So that is how we are going to draw the curtain of this first edition of active and passive voice for today. Thank you. Do join us in the next episode for the next step after determining all these. Thank you very much.